Maksim Izmaylov. I'm CEO and founder of a company called Roomstorm, right here. And I'm also one of the founders of TrialTechCon. That's this event, if you didn't notice. My name is Maksim Izmaylov, as I said. I'll make your life easier. You can call me Max. Hopefully it's so much easier. My company, Roomstorm, we are helping airlines with delays and cancellations. We're actually providing them with a platform which they can use when they have delays and cancellations in order to put passengers from those flights into hotel rooms. And we are replacing very outdated processes like pen and paper, and they're just picking up the phone, start calling around. With all that is gone. With Roomstorm, they just see one dashboard and they book it very quickly, very simply, very elegantly. And Roomstorm, why am I talking about it? It's not a shameless self-promotion. That's why I got interested in all those things that I'm going to talk about today. Who knows this person? I did know about him a couple of years ago, but this is a great guy. His name is William Sellers, and he he's an inventor. He, I think, held around 100 patents in the United States for all kinds of things. Genius. But one of the things that he invented was the famous Sellers screw. So we can take a look here. The Sellers screw is right here. It's the third one. So at the time in 19th century, there was no standard for screws. Every shop, every person who worked on all kinds of machines, they were making those screws themselves. And there was no one standard. Actually, it's not true. There were two standards, one standard coming from the United Kingdom and one that William Sellers invented. And William Sellers, at some point, he got together a bunch of people in Philly and said, hey, in the United States, we don't have one standard. Here's what I invented. Here's why it's good. And it's good because those screws are very easy to make. You only need 3 tools to make them instead of 5 that are needed for all kinds of different other standard screws. Let's do that. And he actually signed up a bunch of big machine shops, and they started adopting his standard. And he had, of course, great guy. He had good reasoning why we should be using this particular standard. But the second standard persisted through actually 1948. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. So Sellers, he talked, after that, after a bunch of big machine shops adopted his screw, Navy came to a bunch of people who worked with machines and devices and stuff and said, what is the standard here? What should we use? What should we rely on? And a lot of people answered, the one standard for screws that you should be using is the William Sellers screw. And then people from railroads came and also asked a lot of people about the standards they should be using for that. And also the answer was Sellers screw. And instead of this, of course, today we see things like this. Still no Wi-Fi. I don't understand why. So those standards were in place. Those two different standards from the United States and United Kingdom were in place for a very long time, from 19th century up until 1948, as I said. And what was the problem? So during the Second World War, a lot of British tanks broke down, of course, because they were under heavy fire, as you can see here. But of course, British had a good ally, United States, and United States sent them a lot of parts and screws and bolts and nuts and everything. And when those parts arrived, British realized they don't fit. It's just it was completely useless. And finally, they decided to get together, and in case there's a conflict like that, or maybe some other unpredicted event, we should have one standard in order for us not to have this problem, not to spend all this money, and people were dying because they didn't have one standard. So finally, in 1948, 3 years, of course, after the war, we decided to have one standard for these things. But why do we need standards? So I think, to me, the answer is very, very simple. One standard, or standards, we need standards because that's a prerequisite for mass production. Without a standard, you cannot have mass production. If you cannot talk to each other using a certain language, you cannot communicate. You cannot produce things on a scale that we see today. So this is the first custom-made, very hipster computer mouse. I think you can see it in the Computer History Museum here in Mountain View. This is, of course, the modern mouse. Today, we have about 1 million different standards in the world, in all kinds of different areas. There was an interesting talk, don't remember the name of the person, about, he was asking about how many people do we need to create this one mouse? How many people participated in the production of this very, very simple device? And he estimated that it would be probably 1,000 people that made coffee for people who designed this thing on their computers, and then people who actually manufactured the plastic thing and the electronic components, et cetera, et cetera. So probably about 1,000 people. We don't know. We will never know. But also, interestingly enough, also there is no one person on this planet right now that would know exactly how to make this device. There's no one person on this planet who would be able to manufacture this device. So that's just a very interesting fun fact. So standards is how we collaborate and connect and talk about things, and you can think about standards as HTTP as a standard, TCP/IP, and all other protocols on the internet. And standards help us to communicate and achieve great things. Standards can also lock you down. So probably you don't know, this is the city of Brest. It's a railroad station on the border of Belarus and Czech Republic. It's very close to the border. What they're doing here, if you can see it, they have this special lifts here. And the problem is, in Russia and in the rest of the Europe, the width of the tracks is different. And it was designed precisely because of the fear of the war. So Russians feared that Germans will come and conquer, and rightfully so. And so they designed the tracks differently. The width of the tracks is different. So when German trains would approach Russia, they would have to stop there, change the wheels, and only then go forward. So this is what's happening here. Probably it's a train from Prague going to Moscow, and they're actually lifting all those cars with passengers in them and changing the wheels, and it takes about 2 hours probably. So it's incredible. So it's an example of how different standards can prevent you from advancing fast enough. Just for somebody who's curious here, so European standard is 1435 millimeters and Russian standard is 1520 millimeters. Just 10 centimeters, but huge difference. So let's talk about standards in travel. There are none. There is a few, actually. No, it was a joke. So I wrote an article about standards in travel a while ago, precisely because working on Roomstorm, we hit that problem. As you know, we are helping airlines with hotel rooms, and we had to integrate with all kinds of different hotel providers. And so we went and asked the first one about their API, their documentation. We did the integration. It took us about a month. That's how long it takes. Went to the second one, and their API was completely different. And that's okay, but even their thinking about how travel should work was different. We had to go around this problem and normalize all that data that we're receiving from different providers, and it's a big problem. And that's why I'm making this argument that the pace of innovation in travel is in this not very good state today, precisely because of those things. If we had one standard for getting hotel availability from different providers, and if it was easy to learn about, if the documentation was ready and up there, if the examples was there, it would be as easy as integrating Google Maps or Twilio or any other modern API that we have right now. That's one of the illustrations that I used in my article. Because we don't have those standards, we allow a lot of these companies in the middle exist, actually. And that's why today you're looking at a screen with some sort of spinner there when you're looking for airline, I don't know, flight availability, or that's why it takes, when you book a room somewhere, then it says, oh, actually that room wasn't available. Happens all the time, and precisely because of this, all those connections in the middle, and that's why it takes about 30 minutes for the information to go from the hotel to the traveler. And it's just, this is a very simplified chart, and all the different systems are different, of course. This is a generalization. I said there are no standards. There are quite a few standards that people worked on. So there's the Open Travel Alliance. There was an attempt to create standards for hotels, and it's called Lodging Extensions to Schema.org. As far as I know, Expedia and Priceline, they have their own standards for hotels that they work with. And Roomkey, of course, they are trying to create their own standards for the hotels or hotel chains that participate in that network. The problem with this is all these people didn't create those standards with the developers in mind. It's still very hard to access standards from Open Travel, Lodging Extensions to Schema.org, and never used a single person who would use that. Expedia and Priceline, the urban legend that I heard is that they got together with a bunch of hotels and said, I presume they agreed on some sort of standard, but they implemented it differently. So the hotels end up saying, you guys, figure it out between yourself. Here's an Excel spreadsheet with our data. That's how it works. Up to this date, hotels use Excel spreadsheets to share their information with these big guys. And Roomkey, of course, is collaboration between 6 big hotel chains in order to create an OTA without these guys, without these big OTAs. So why is it happening? Why we don't see a lot of adoption here in terms of this standard? Because how would I would feel when a big guy like Expedia told me, here's this great standard, use it. I would immediately think that they're trying to lock me down, right? That's this bad situation when, different rail tracks. So if I use Expedia, probably it's going to be so hard for me to implement Priceline or other standard, I would just not do that. I would stick with Expedia forever and ever. And that's the end of the story, right? That's why a lot of people actually fear that, and that's precisely why Roomkey was created. They want to avoid integrating with Expedia and Priceline, and they try to avoid their fees. So we're talking about pace of innovation in the travel space here, and we all have this picture in mind. You are at your whiteboard. Here's the idea that you're working on. Here's the clear path to success. Here's how you do it. You have all the funding. You have everything. But here's the picture of a person who tried to integrate with the latest XML API. That's how it really, in reality, it looks like. It's very nasty. You spend, as I said, we spent a month figuring out APIs from our hotel providers, and that's the case across the board. This is the ideal situation. This is how it looks like, ideally, when you want to use NDC. NDC, as you know, stands for New Distribution Capability. This is a standard from IATA, and they try to impose it to all kinds of different airlines in the world. The problem is their API is already out of date. It's an XML API. They started working on it 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and it took them about 3 years to come up with the specification and they tried to convince everyone to use it, and it's finally getting traction, which is good. There should be a standard. It would be great if there was a standard that everyone could use, but also they forgot to include us, people in the trenches who are working on those things, because that standard is unusable, very hard to use. So this is how this company, Jet, they're from Italy, they try to simplify this for developers. They try to simplify the NDC for developers. So for you non-technical people, this is how it should look like. And probably techies and engineers, it's very easy to understand what's going on here. You're just searching for a flight from London to JFK, there's the date, etc. And here's how the standard from Open Travel Alliance looks like. This is the first page. This is the first page that I see when I go to Jet. This is how it looks like. Fill out all of those fields. By the way, are you looking for previous versions, or it's just a huge mess. When you download this, it's just a bunch of XML files that you have to go through. There's like all that schema. Can you run any examples against this? Of course not. How much time will it take you as a developer to work with this specification, versus this? A lot more. Answer is a lot more. Just a few days ago, I was talking to Art Norris, one of the founders of Nor1, and he told me that one of the biggest problems that he's seen in the travel space, and maybe in other spaces as well, is ego, a lot of ego. Why do we see this problem? Booking.com tries to give you a standard. Why do they do that? They want your money. They want to lock you down. They want to impose their fees on you. Great. Great business model. People from Expedia, kudos. Priceline tried to do the same thing, tried to come up with a standard. I don't quite understand, and I don't know what was the logic behind the thematics, logic extensions from schema.org. Probably something along those lines. Big egos. I think it's finally the time we have the tech. Norm was talking about it. Mohammed was talking about it. We have the tech. We have people who are very excited about this problem, and we can solve the ego problem in the travel space. Let's see at the ego-less projects that maybe you personally don't use, but actually you use at least this everyday Python. Whenever you go to any of Google websites, you are using Python. A lot of tools that are created on the web are made using Git. If you see very nice dashboards with nice graphs, etc., probably you're looking at D3. R is statistics language, and Spark is an Apache open source project. So we use those ego-less projects all the time, or products that are created using those projects. And in travel space, I haven't seen anything like that. It's always about money. It's good. It's great. It's great to make money. But I think we, as the industry, we need to collaborate on a new set of standards that would allow each and everyone to benefit from it. And one of the things that I talk about all the time is how do we enable more startups to innovate in the travel space? And Mohammed was talking about the pace of innovation in the travel space. And it's a big problem. So if you want to start a travel startup today, you want to sell airline tickets, or you want to sell hotels, the bar is very high. You will have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money to get that data. And then, only then you can start innovating, combining in interesting ways, so all that inventory you're getting from hotels and airlines and perhaps tours and activities providers. So we need to lower that bar for more people, for more people who are excited about travel, who want to invade this space, to be able to do so. So I created this website a while ago. Not a lot of users, nothing special, or people probably ever looked at it. But me, inside of our company, we're working on an open source standard that we're publishing there. And anyone in this room can just go and collaborate on it. And we don't own it. This is completely open source. This is public domain. Is it public domain or MIT? Jakob wouldn't know. Anyway, so we don't own it, and we don't want to own it. We want us all to be able to collaborate on this project and create those standards. So what are the examples of those standards that we need in the travel space in order to move faster? Just a few that I mentioned in my article. Traveler data. Whenever you go somewhere, so I should have replaced this with personalization, right? Whenever you go somewhere, there should be a profile that other companies could access. And I know that Allset is doing that. A few other companies that I know in that space who are doing that. And that's great. But then again, one company, if you want to integrate with some other provider, if you want to use something else, if there is no one standard, again, you will hit the same problem all over again. Integrate, oh, the standard is different. Okay, let's, I don't know, work around this. It's a complete mess. Up to this date, we don't have a real-time hotel availability API. Jeff, do we have one? Do you have one? The answer is no. He's hesitant. That's no. You can't, but maybe not. We should have it. Where is it? Flight load API, completely non-existent. An example would be, I was talking to a bunch of people from airports, all kinds of different airports, and they actually do not know how many people are on the airplane that is landing right now. They don't know. It is crazy. Some of them maybe do, but not all of them definitely, the minority. And of course, if you know how many people are on that plane, you will be able to pull up, an appropriate number of security personnel and TSA, well, whatever you want. Trip ID. So we have this interesting standard for flights, for flight tickets. So it's called PNR. PNR is the 6 alphanumeric code that you have on all the flight tickets that you ever had in your life, probably. But does it work for buses? Nope. Does it work for trains? Nope. Does it work for other things than flights? Yes. For hotels, very rare cases, but that's about it. So we need to work on all the standards. If you can suggest something else, so that's means suggest your. And this is about it. And I will take your questions and answer them to my best knowledge.
So Max, you called it ego. Yeah. It's really business, okay? It's really business obstacles. So airports and airlines don't share data because they're afraid if they do, something bad's going to happen, like happened to them from their eyes. One airline was going to start a new route in and out of Amsterdam, and they let the Amsterdam airline authority, the airport, let a competitor know that. And so there's a lot of distrust there. So it's not a question of standards, it's a question of trust. The other thing is that you would need an army much bigger than the folks in this room to adopt your standards. And it's never happened in the travel industry. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's never happened. So how are we going to do it?
Someone has to start it, right? All the big movements started with probably 1 or 2 people, so that's what I'm trying to do, I guess. We need a revolution, and I hope that it's going to get bigger. But if you think about it, we're building all this crazy AI algorithms for speech recognition, for getting data, for booking your flights and stuff. But all those companies that you saw on the market, that are on the market right now, when you can book a flight just by texting to that bot, right? I need a flight tomorrow to New York from San Francisco, and I want to be back on Saturday, right? Works. But all those companies are hitting all the same problems. And in 5 years, if we have the status quo in terms of standards, in terms of data availability around hotels and airlines, those AI algorithms will be it's just a moot point. It doesn't matter. If the data is not there, you can have the best algorithms in the world. It doesn't matter if you don't have data.
All right, sorry, 2 questions, but one's really easy. Is anyone working with a GraphQL, graph query language for travel standards?
Jakub, not that we know of. Jakub is the CTO of my company. Sorry, I'm asking him stuff all the time.
Well, that was easy. So the other question I had, it seems like the reason why there's less incentive for collaboration, and this is just my impression in part because there's less of a mechanism by which commissions can be accounted for. Has anyone looked at ways to implement some sort of commission I mean, I don't want to go back to the blockchain, but something similar to that where we can keep track of commissions and who's owed what as far as
it's completely doable these days. Yeah. I mean, as I said, the tech is there. We just need to work on it. But that is possible. A company can totally do that. Again, if we don't have one language that we all will speak, it's a problem.
Thank you.
Max, I want to argue with you a little bit. There are standards.
Yes. Okay.
There are not internet standards, but there are standards. Otherwise, we couldn't do queries on airline availability. We couldn't book hotels. We couldn't do a lot of things we do today.
Right.
Those standards were put in place because industry groups got together. The hotels decided to build a switch as opposed to change their own systems. The airlines, on the other hand, decided to change their own standards, and everybody adheres to a single set of standards to communicate back and forth. So they do work. They just haven't been modernized.
Right. Great point. And by saying standards, I mean modern standards for people who are here in Silicon Valley. Do I know about those standards? I don't know. How much effort do I need in order for me to go learn about those standards and use them? If it's so hard for me that I have to spend a few months working with them, it's not it's not available for me. It's like this UK's guy's standard. His standard it worked, right? But the problem is, in order to make screws upon his standard, you had to use 5 different instruments. It took forever to do. And this guy, William Sellers, 2 instruments, here you go. This is very easy to do. It takes, I don't know, a couple minutes. I don't know. I'm just completely guessing right now, right? But the point is, if those standards, so they do exist. If they're not good, we need something better.
I agree.
Jeff had a question.
As a hotel owner, how do you open your availability to a standard without exposing some of the game theory that you have behind your allocation? For example, when my competitor in London, I see them selling rooms at a faster rate because they've underpriced, I can capitalize on that because we're tracking their availability.
It's a technical problem. It's not a problem of a standard.
No, but okay. Let's say that there was a standard that Open Travel had built. How do you protect the hotel?
Very, very easy. You can have, we have all sorts of AI algorithms that will tell this smart system in the center about your behavior. And they would say, oh, actually, Jeff is trying to guess whether that hotel is selling at a certain rate or not. And we will able to see that. It's just a programming. It's easy, man.
So I understand how standards work in manufactured items like screwdrivers and train tracks.
Awesome.
That was the easy part. And to Norm's point, yeah, once you learn how to to monetize trust, you can build standards in the travel industry. But what other service industry is there, by example, where standards exist and standards work? In the service industry, non-manufacturing.
So all those examples that, let me talk a little bit more about these guys over here. So all these things are de facto standards, right? So if you tell me to create a new piece of software for you today, I will go and use Git. That's my standard.
So give me an example of an industry. Is it finance? Is it nursing? Is it healthcare?
Internet.
Just
Good industry enough. So 98% of all the internet is powered by this little penguin over here. And that was created. Let me talk a little bit about this. So the idea behind the creation of this open and open source standards for travel is precisely what Norm said, or what Bob actually was mentioning, that a bunch of people got together, created something, put something on paper, put it out there. The problem is it's already like 3 years out of date, first of all, and not a lot of people were involved. With Linux, for example, thousands of people are involved. It's developing with incredible rates every day. I guess there are commits and there are fixes and bug fixes, etc. And that's precisely what I want to see in the travel space as well. If there was a standard that me, you, everyone here in this room had access to, not just access to, not the ability to change it in any way, but if you could suggest improvements to that standard, how you can do right now with Linux and Python and Git and all these other things, that's the pace of innovation. That's the level of involvement that I want to see in the travel industry as well. So the example of an industry is internet. The internet is powered by all those things and many more. Sorry.
So, I mean, I love the idea. I mean, obviously this would be utopia.
You're right.
But what incentive do the major players have to change? Because at the moment you're looking at, American Airlines who formed their system back in like 1960 something with IBM. So you're talking billions of dollars of potential changes to the incumbent players in the business who, what extra do they gain from this? Because it's great for a developer, it's great for a startup. I love it because, I'm a startup too, but why would an Expedia, a Priceline, an American Airlines, why would they spend billions of dollars potentially in changing and adopting a standard that really doesn't get any immediate impact to their bottom line?
So it's just built in all those big organizations. The inertia is built into those organizations. And of course, they cannot change very fast. They're not startups. And it's very easy to understand them because if they changed one variable very little, they can see, a big drop in the revenues. They are afraid of changing things. And to answer your question, what incentive do they have? None, right? But again, in 5 years, us as travelers, if we don't see this change, and if we want to have all those chatbots that we'll be texting with and booking hotels and flights, we have to change this. We have to drive this.
To me, the thing that really seems to be a disconnect in the industry. And we were down in Plug and Play yesterday. What is their theme? Let's bring industry together with startups. Why does JetBlue have JetBlue Ventures?
Completely agree.
So everyone in the industry, traditional industry, is saying, we've got to learn from startups, but we're not going to agree upon a standard. Right. We're not going to do that. So it's almost like it needs to be a movement. And before you have the commons, you need to organize as software companies who want to work on the travel industry, which is a bit of a neglected segment when you talk about software. I mean, anyone in this room, when the engineers, when you came out and you got your degree, you just say, I want to go into the travel industry. That's where they are. No, you want to work for Google. You want to work for Facebook. So whatever made you decide to do a startup in the travel industry, there is that buzz out there. It is not just here in the Valley, it's globally. And I think you need to organize as a group, and then you need to do the other thing which all these have in common. You download and you upload. I've said this to Max before, that Jim Davidson at Fairlogics, which, by the way, that's NDC. Fairlogics created this. That's why it's so old, because they created it like 7, 8 years ago. He tried to do a travel agency desktop called Spark. Not this Spark, different Spark. Okay? He had a bunch of people download. It was going to be open source. A bunch of people downloaded it. No one uploaded it. No one acted in open source fashion. And that's what it's a behavioral change among everyone in this room. And if you do it at like a lobby and you really organize, I think you might be able to change. And then you go to the plug and plays and the Y Combinators and the other incubators and accelerators, and you get them to understand that's the problem.
So I would like to go a little bit the other way. So I think all those attempts that I listed previously on one of my previous slides failed because those initiatives were very top-down. A bunch of people got together again, and it took them a lot of time in order to propagate that knowledge down to the food chain. What I'm talking about, I'm an engineer. That's my background. Jakub is an engineer. Jeff is an engineer. We can get together, and we're doing that. We're talking to Jeff and other people, and we're saying, hey, let's just use this format for now. And that's what we are uploading to Travel Commons, so other people can see it, and they can say, oh, someone already integrated with Jeff, and this is how easy it is to do, so let me use this thing as well. And that's how we drive adoption. The other way around, and that's how all these projects got, onto the market. That's how they did it. One person started Linux. Other people jumped on that project because they loved the idea, and that's how Linux gained popularity. Git, same person, by the way, Linux and Git. All these other projects, and that's what I suggest for the travel space as well. And we're doing that. I'm doing that.
Yeah, but you also have to lobby. Then Bob and I were talking,
yes.
and we were talking about the original Open Travel Alliance, and I was in a meeting like this with a guy named Nick Lanyon. Okay, and I remember him standing up. It wasn't a meeting like this; it was a meeting of the travel folks, and it was like 15 years ago. And he said, "XML, everyone's got to get on board with XML," and he was the driving force behind the Open Travel Alliance. And then, as Bob just said to me, the people in the industry did not send their best and brightest there, and they never, as you said, opened it up to the development community. It was all internal. And so you do this, but then you bring it to as a group, and you have to show some type of strength. I mean, Bobby, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when Bob was at Sabre, I remember we had a conference, and the CIO of Sabre said, oh, Bob gave him a call during the weekend and saying that you had to move to Linux, right? And that was Sabre.
But that's precisely what should not happen. Like when a manager decides to move to Linux, that's wrong. Very wrong. If that manager doesn't have the engineering knowledge about.
Yeah, actually, I was the chief architect.
All right, no, then it's legit.
No. Part of the problem is that the standards were slow in coming, and the business pressures to implement were great. So everybody has an XML API, web services or REST, but they don't all talk to each other.
Great. And I completely agree with you, 100%. The standards are slow, the business should be quick, and that's why we're saying right now we're working, our business is quick with certain people that we work right now, right? Let's put something together very quickly, something that works. Does it work? Great. Do we like it? All right, let's publish it. Next version, how do we improve it? Maybe there's one person already who's seen this standard on the internet and they're like, oh, actually, here you have a security vulnerability, or you can make an improvement here. And by the way, I already did it. Use it, right? That's how we should work. And then this thing becomes a standard, not top down. Hey, we came up with a standard here. I think we're running out of time. I think last question here.
I was just going to say that if you look at the history of computing, it seems like it's a classic problem, right? I mean, it's happened time and time again. You've got PC versus Mac. You've got, Android versus iOS. Maybe Linux is a good example of how the Unix industry got normalized over time because of an open source approach, right? Back in the day, everybody had their flavor of Unix tightly coupled to their workstation, which was tied to their maintenance plans and their upsell of the new versions of software. And, the analogy to GDS is certainly there. So how can you overcome that kind of classic challenge that we've had in industries
So I do not
history of computing?
Right. I do not want to overcome. I do not want to create one standard to rule them all. If there are 2 standards, or maybe 3, not 25, 3 standards different standards that people in different countries. I can totally understand that. Different countries, different cultures, different understanding about how travel should work. Perfect. If there are 3 standards that you can choose from, you can understand the implications of that choice. Great.
The last thing is to Norm's point about, business objectives. The airline airport is a classic example. Airlines care about on-time performance, and airports want people shopping in their concessions. So,
But then they're
inherently
lying.
conflicted.
But then they're lying by saying, hey, we care about you, passenger. No, not really.
Well, sure.
Right?
No, everybody cares about the bottom line. That's the bottom
Right.
line, right? But it's a great discussion anyway.
Thank you. Thank you.